Holy, 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 holy. This past week has been a week of grief. And it's also been a week of memory and of meaning. A couple of weeks ago, a little bit over almost 2 weeks ago, our beloved AV, Craig, lost his beloved mother, who was so near and dear to him. This past week, we lost Daniel Gildesgame. And just 2 days ago, Richard Cohen. We didn't know your mother, Craig, and many of us knew Daniel quite well. His presence, ubiquitous and powerful. But Richard Cohen, many of you might not know who he was, but he was a beloved member of our community for a strong period, and he participated robustly in our community band, always ready on the clarinet. And so as we mourn them this week, I found myself asking a question that I suspect many of us carry also in our hearts, if quietly, which is, what does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean, in the language of our Torah, to lead a holy life? That word holy, holy, more than just a good life, more than maybe even a principled life. The word kadosh, kedusha, holiness. It's not a word that all of us have on our tongues. It doesn't come easily to us. It's not a descriptor. We have influencer now. Powerful people, good people, moral people, ethical people, mensches. But when was the last time you said, oh, that's a holy person? Or maybe when was the last time you thought, I'd like to be a holy person? And what did you mean when you said that? This word, holy, comes with a kind of connotation of piety, scrupulousness, unattainability, maybe even a mystic. But this week, through mourning and listening to the stories of Daniel and Richard, makes me think about a holy life. It's come alive for me. This word, holy or kadosh, many of us have another word for it, mattering. Many of us are hungry for lives that matter. Not just lives that are successful, but lives that resonate, that align, that mean something. And in a noisy, cynical world, it's easy to forget that holiness or mattering isn't out of reach. It's much closer than we think. Now, in order to see it in that vein, we have to disassociate holiness for a moment from robes and rituals, maybe from some of the mystics that we were thinking. Even this week, as I was reading about the new Pope, should live and be well. Someone described him as exuding holiness. Someone said about him that if he wasn't going to become the Pope, he was going to become a saint. And I thought to myself, what does that mean? Does he glow? I mean, simply put, it means that people feel something in his presence. That there's a way of being, of walking through the world that reminds others of something bigger than themselves, something more loving and more real. And that presence, of course, isn't just limited to popes or saints or tzaddikim. The Torah says plainly in tomorrow morning's Torah reading in the famous section of the book of Leviticus known as the Holiness Code, the Kedusha Code, the manual on being holy. It says, Kiddoshim to you, Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. Verse 2 in chapter 19 says, Kiddoshim, holy shall you be. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem. God says, because I'm holy. It's not a suggestion. It's not a wish. It's more like a prophecy, a promise, a commandment. There's something about that, right? That to you here that's a little bit interesting. Kiddushim to you in Hebrew means you shall be holy. Is that inevitable? Is it, of course you'll be holy, that's the promise? Or is it a commandment, an imperative? Is it something to become? It's both. Michal Biton, who's a scholar and a friend, she's also a rabbi downtown, she reframes this verse beautifully. She teaches that Kedusha isn't some cosmic status. It's what we call something when it matters at a different level of being. Shabbat is holy, kadosh, not because the weekdays are bad, but because we treat it differently, right? A marriage is holy because of its covenantal depth. Even in commerce and speech and intimacy can become holy when treated with intention. Holiness, says Michal Biton, is not inherited, it's practiced. It's how we declare this thing matters to me. Now that's a remarkable statement. It means this thing matters to me and that I matter to it. She was teaching her children that whenever they say a thank you, whenever they open a door, it's not just in that moment that they're being polite, but they are mattering. They're making a difference. They're moving the cosmic needle. There's an imbued and inherent assumption that behavior matters. Holiness means life matters, even its most minute and most subatomic moments that go under the radar, even that can become holy. I was also reading this week about other elements of holiness, not just what you do, but also what holiness can do to you. A beloved member of our community, John Ruskay, sent me a speech that he had given many years ago when he received his honorary doctorate from Hebrew Union College. I was so profoundly thankful to him, if he's watching, for sharing that speech back in 2013. John, who went on to become one of the great leaders, and still one of the great leaders in the Jewish community, who made a difference in so many ways, in so many people's lives, and still does, had one moment in his speech where he talked about his career and talked about what he learned in leadership. And when he was doing that, he told a story about how holiness became concrete to him, became real to him. When he went to Camp Ramah, to a Jewish summer camp, and had an immersive experience of Shabbat. And even though John has more than just an honorary doctorate, he also is he actually achieved, he's a doctor, he has a doctorate. And so academia, he writes, is not foreign to him. But he writes, I didn't learn Kedusha, holiness, in the classroom, I experienced it directly. It seared my soul. Shabbat, a day set apart, a day that matters, a day that is given special significance, a day that is infused with being itself, but also a day that we must make holy. Not just honor its inherent holiness, but also make it holy. We must allow its specialness to wash over us, to sear into our soul something of what Kedusha means. How many people have met holy people? How many people have been touched by someone whose presence reminds them of life's sacred qualities? How many people have been moved by a being, a dog, a cat, a teacher, someone in whose presence you felt seen in ways that made you come to life, made you feel that you were special, you were significant, you mattered, you were kadosh. There's something about Kiddushim to you that says, I promise that you will be holy because you already are, and I promise you must feel commanded to make holy because the world needs that. The world forgets that. The world can become unconscious to what is sacred. The Baal Shem Tov once asked his students to stop praying before praying. He said, don't pray yet, listen. They'd all gathered in their sanctuary, and the Baal Shem Tov, the great master, said, don't pray yet, just listen. So they sat listening until they heard, like, pause, pause. And the Baal Shem Tov smiled. The students were confused. They were ready to pray. The Baal Shem Tov said, no, you know what that is, tapping? That's the sandlar, that's the shoemaker, Pinchas. You can hear him from over there, all over there. And the Baal Shem Tov said each time he brings down his hammer, he whispers before he hits the shoe, for the sake of the holy name. May I mend this shoe as if I were mending the world. May I mend this shoe as if I were mending the world. The Baal Shem Tov said to his students, there are prayers in that tapping of a shoe that are holier than many spoken in synagogues and churches and mosques, and in maybe even whole cities devoted to holiness. When the heart is turned towards heaven, he said, even a hammer becomes a harp. Even a hammer becomes a harp. After feeling the holiness of Shabbat, John could then want to bring more and more of the TU, of the holiness of what can still become holy. What tappings of the hammer will make anything and everything shine with intrinsic beauty. After experiencing the holiness of a person, you might feel a bit more awake and smile a bit more in various moments of your life. You might think, oh, why am I rushing through this moment to get to the next one? Why is this cab driver less holy than any other human? Why is this person before me any less holy? You wake up. It's told the story of the Buddha that when he had become enlightened, that he was walking along the road when a group of sannyasis, a group of devotees, mystics, ascetics were walking, and they witnessed him. And there was something about him. He had a glow, he had an aura, and they couldn't figure it out. They said to him, Master, are you a god? And he said, no. He said, Master, are you a prophet? He said, no. An avatar? No. Then what are you? He said, I am awake. A Buddha means to be awake. We might say he was kadosh. He had imbued himself with a sense of the sacred so that he was mattering and making sure that people knew that each moment mattered and each person mattered. A thank you that is said from the heart is kadosh. A pause to honor its transition is kadosh. An act of justice done not just to be correct, but because the world is worth mending is kadosh. Even a hammer becomes a harp. That is what holiness is. Not the grand, big gestures, but in the given, in our work, in our care, in just this. At Daniel's graveside this past Wednesday, I'm standing there with you all, and our beloved Neely started to sing for the sake of the unification of God's name as she was using the shovel. And the great care and concern and love and the attention that each and every one of you brought to that moment was remarkable. The searing sadness and also the Kedusha, the holiness. As Ariel, you used your hands and brought dirt to fulfill the mitzvah, as you lovingly cared for your mother and held her in her grief, as friends supported you, Andrea. In this community, as people reached out to Craig, who lost the one who mattered, the word matter from the word mother, the one who mothered you and told you what it mattered in life. Small moments of holiness and care and concern. I was reading this morning the Substack of my friend and someone that I had the privilege of interviewing this past Sunday in a live taping of my new podcast, Detours and Destinations at the 93rd Street Y. Rabbi Dr. J. Michelson, a mystic, a polymath, a Renaissance man, who wrote this morning on a Substack feed about the various ways to look at the Statue of Liberty. He recalled and thought that, the Statue of Liberty is a pretty straightforward symbol of all the things that make America, right, great, or what we aspire to become, the Kedoshim to you, what we want to be. Quoting Emma Lazarus' poem, right, give me your tired and your poor. He became acutely aware that not everyone shares that vision at this moment. Not everyone is equally convinced that those are the values that the Statue of Liberty speaks to and that great poem delineates. But when he was articulating this, it became super clear, of course, that even though some reject its vision entirely, that yearning to be free, that yearning to be free that Emma Lazarus spoke to is a kind of civic, you shall be holy, Kedoshim to you, you shall be free, that we must live into it as an imperative, that a promise already in presence. We are already free, but we could be freer. We are already liberated, but we could be more liberated. That the inevitability of it, its promise of its truth in this moment is cut against the vision of what it can and should become. And in its heart, that poem, like Kedoshim to you, says, people matter. The vulnerable matter. The unhoused matter. Those who don't look like us matter. Those who don't worship like us matter. So what if we treated that poem of Emma Lazarus like we treat the Shema and proclaimed it full throttle? What if we said that our country should have a Kedusha quotient, a KQ? That we measure ourselves as a society by how much sacredness we feel is civically manifest. What if we could measure it? Do we feel that our community has become more loving, more accepting, more kind? Is there a greater sense that small acts matter? Is there a greater sense amongst us that just to be an American is special and that we wish in some profound way that everyone would be able to share in liberties and in freedoms? That like John Ruskay, having tasted the Kedusha of Shabbat, the holiness of Shabbat, we want everyone to have the holiness of Shabbat. What if that were the case? What if we viewed each and every person as kadosh, as sacred, and as our job in the world to bring more of it into the world? What if every camp and classroom and JCC and synagogue was a gateway to the felt holiness that many of us have experienced, like Ramah for John, or Shabbat for our beloved Daniel when he would come here and see his sacred community, like a shoemaker's hammer became for the Baal Shem Tov. The world is possible. That world is possible. Kedoshim to you, you shall be holy because life is, because you are, and you must make more holiness because not yet, not yet. To close with a poem from Wendell Berry, who knew of these things in his poem, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. To the memories of your beloved mother, Craig, the memories of Daniel and Richard, we thank you for leading lives of meaning, for the small acts and the ways that you lifted others, for all of those small, tender, important ways of mattering and making others feel they matter. May God bless us to lift up the harp that is the hammer and make this world more holy. Amen.
Amen.